Hi, I'm Stuart from HiFi PiG. I'm here with Ollie from PMC. We're here to talk about the European debut of the 25i active loudspeakers.
Absolutely.
From PMC, which we saw it when it was debuted in Bristol. And I think it's such a cool idea, but apparently, well, Ollie will tell you all about it and how it was all planned and all the rest of it, but it's such a cool idea. Over to you, Ollie.
Thanks very much. So yes, this is now the global launch of what we released into the UK in Bristol at the Bristol HiFi show. So I'm holding in my hand something not to hit Stu with. This is an active module which forms an active upgrade kit that our customers can now use to upgrade any 25 series or 25i series product between the bookshelf 21 and the 24. So all of the two-way models.
Can you do that yourself, or is it a dealer-only thing?
You can do it yourself. We'd recommend a dealer does it for you, but it's incredibly simple. So back when we first designed the 25 series, we knew we were eventually going to get to this stage where we would have an upgrade kit, an active upgrade kit. So the panel is large enough that you can drop the existing panel out, lose the passive crossover. We installed this special multi-pin single connector, so you can easily do it. It's 6 screws, 1 connector, and you're done. An active crossover gives you amazing control over the crossover slopes and the phase coherency. So with that extra control over the drive units, you normally get a much more vivid, accurate, distinctive sounding mid-range. Everything sounds just cleaner.
There is a reason that they use them in studios.
Exactly, yeah. All of our studio monitors are active speakers. Yeah. So yeah, I just touched on that. We've got the upgrade kit. We've also got a new, you can buy from factory, an active version of the 25, 21, 22, 23 and 24. So that goes from a small bookshelf up to a large floor standard. The price of the upgrade kit is probably around about €2,100.
Which is not silly, is it?
I like to think that that is a lot of value for money. There's between an upgrade kit, there's 4 channels of amplification at 100 watts each, which handles all of the drive units, and then you've got the crossover too. One thing to add about the upgrade kit is they're all the same. So when you take it out of the box, there's a model selector connector like this, and you just choose the model of speaker you've got. Like I said, any of the 25 series, any of the 25i series from the 21, 24 models, and you just connect that on. Whack it in the speaker.
Okay.
Having the signal for the crossover going through the active crossover, dividing the frequencies and then putting them through the power amplifiers. The power amplifiers are then directly connected to the drive units.
And so only dealing with a very limited range of frequencies.
Exactly. Yeah. But importantly, that direct connection to the drive unit, the signal's not going through a passive crossover, which has lossy components on it, and they also sort of add a bit of a lag to everything. You can imagine like all of this resistive load coupled to your drive unit and blocking it between the power amplifier. So you hear like a really fast, clean attacking bass that starts and stops really quickly, and that's because of the active having the amplifier connected direct to the drive
PMC
unit.
speakers anyway, the whole transmission line that you call the ATL?
ATL. The advanced transmission line.
Absolutely, is a feature of PMC speakers anyway, and the bass is always great from Fenestrias to 25i's. The bass is always really cool, so really tight and
for sure, it's a classic feature of all PMC speakers, and it does come from the ATL, and that's why like you said, the dynamics and the pace of the LF is supreme.
It is really visceral. It was the first thing that we sat, Lynn and I sat in Bristol and went, ooh, that's really very different from the passive to the actives, which is really good. So this is the launch for the world launch?
This is now globally available, all of the active models and the upgrade kit. So I'm sure there's plenty of customers out there that will be considering to upgrade.
I would imagine so. Thank you ever so much. We're going to now go down and look at a system that we heard earlier on, which is the Atmos. How many channels?
Atmos Extravaganza.
It's absolutely, you'll not get an idea of what it's like, but it's absolutely incredible. And I wrote all my notes down and went, well, it's 300 grand. And you look around the show, some of the speakers that we are experiencing here that are gazillions of pounds, and 300 grand for what you're about to witness and see is just insane value for money.
There's a fair few 2-channel systems around the show, which, like you say, would be 300,000 for perhaps just a pair of speakers, plus electronics. Yeah. We've got 21 speakers downstairs, including all of the electronics to power them, and they're active.
and it sounds insane. It really does sound insane. It's a real experience, and if you ever get the opportunity to experience that PMC surround sound system, go and experience it. So we've just been upstairs with Ollie looking at the 25i active loudspeakers from PMC. We've come downstairs into this absolutely mental room, and Ollie's going to go through the system in a little bit, but earlier on we were with Steve Wilson for the PMC Immersive experience, which was a really incredible experience. We've got videos from that from earlier on, but it's it's a Dolby Atmos system, but
Yep.
how many speakers have we got in here?
We've got 21 speakers in here.
And how much power is in here?
48,000 watts.
Okay, so we've got the beasts,
We've got 4 of the beasts, the
Yep.
PMC BST subwoofer.
and on the sides we've got
BB6 XBD, the bigger active speaker in
And they're a
comparison to
studio-
the little actives upstairs.
they're a studio monitor.
Completely studio monitor. We
Yep.
do a domestic version, but it looks just as aggressive as this.
They look great, I have to say. They look like they sound.
So we have 3 BB6 XBDs across the front for the LCR.
Yep.
The beasts,
Yep.
LFE, and then in the surrounds we've got 8 CI140s doing all of the surround channels.
Which are the 3 at the side, 2 at the back, yeah?
Yep, 3 at the side, 2 at the back.
And for
Exactly.
heights and...
We have 6 CI65s for the height channels.
We spoke to Steve earlier on about there being a certain amount of resistance with audiophiles and the 2-channel brigade with surround sounds. So why do you think, we've got Steve's take on this, what do you think is the resistance to it, and why do you think there's a resistance to surround sound with audiophiles?
I mean, like, first of all, that was kind of the whole topic and the point of Steve's talk, and he did a really good job of trying to persuade people by talking through the benefits, some of the decisions, and, you know, it's coming from a guy that has obviously worked in stereo most of his life and has now transitioned over to immersive. I mean, I agree with a lot of what Stephen was saying, which is that it's another dimension that you can add to listening to your audio. The other nice thing about Dolby Atmos, and the reason why I think the format's going to work and stick around, is that you can listen to the same Dolby Atmos mix or the track, but you can decode it to 2-channel, and it's the same track. And also, to be able to mix that, because they use an object-based method of mixing, you can do that a lot faster, and you can do it all at the same time as when you would be producing the stereo version. So rather than the days where you do a stereo and then to do like your 5.1 surround, you've got to like go back to the studio and remix it all. It's this massive task. It can all be done in the beginning. So it kind of makes it a lot easier to do. And through Apple Music, it's very accessible to listen to.
But with regards to studios, you've got studios all around the world. PMC have got studios all around the world. That
We have our own studios in London, Nashville, LA, New York, and then we're in a huge number of other studios.
Okay. The whole Atmos thing is, we're in a gazillion speaker system, but you don't actually need that for Atmos, do you?
No, I mean, the smallest size system that Dolby recommends you have if you are creating Atmos is they would go for a 7.1.4. So, that was
explain
7 surrounds, 4 overheads,
Okay.
and 1 subwoofer.
Okay.
It's kind of like the bare minimum to be able to have enough discrete channels to be able to mix accurately.
I thought one of the things that Steve mentioned was nothing is lost from the music, but something is added in the dimensionality of the whole thing. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, again, like if you fold down the Atmos mix into stereo, it sounds great. When you open it up, even if you're listening through binaural, it's you know, it gives you that extra.
That's on
something.
headphones, binaural, yeah?
Yeah, and of course also, like, you know, some Atmos mixes, different people do things in different ways. So some of the mixes, they just have the reverberation panned to all of the surround channels, and maybe not even up that loud, so it just gives that little bit of a feeling like if you're listening to a jazz record, it feels like you're a bit more in a jazz club, which is nice.
The first time that we experienced the whole Atmos with you guys was with the Kind of Blue remix,
Yeah.
which was, we're going back
We were
5
right here
7 years?
5 years
Is it
ago,
5 years ago?
in Munich.
Which was an incredible experience. And we're talking about a record that was recorded, I don't know when it was recorded, I'm not a huge fan of jazz, but we're going way back.
Yeah.
But it just brought something to the whole recording that did make you feel like you were in the middle of the recording. And
Yeah.
I think that's what, I think there's a whole, that resistance that we spoke about, I don't understand why people are so resistive to it. Peter, we had a conversation with Peter years ago about how when stereo came in, the people that had been listening to mono for years were resistive to stereo. And I think that's where we are with the whole immersive experience now.
Sure.
And I think that will change over time, wouldn't you agree?
Well, I was saying earlier, we've got our PMC studios, which are all Atmos studios. And we use those to demonstrate our products, but also to kind of introduce a lot of people to the world of Atmos and help them through that transition. So we have quite a lot of mix engineers that come to us and have said, record labels wanting me to do mixes in Atmos now. I don't know what this is. I've always worked in stereo. So we sit them down and play them some Atmos and talk through how it works, how the object-based mixing idea works. And you can see about maybe half of them, they listen to it and they go, yeah, I don't like this. I can't do this. There's too many options. Don't like it. And they get out of there.
Right.
And then the other half, you can sit there and they go, oh, wow, I've now got infinitely more possibilities of what I could do with all of the artistic impression on this track.
But it's not just music either, is it? There's the whole gaming thing. There's the whole cinema thing that is now in Atmos and all the rest of it.
Yeah, I think gaming, like cinema, is going to be much more easily widely accepted. Well, it is. It just is the standard.
I get why people don't like it, but I also don't get why.
It's a good question about how you're going to consume it. How are you going to listen to it? No one is going to listen to it in this room with this system. Well, maybe two people.
Okay.
Everyone's going to listen to it on headphones. Okay. And so then you're thinking, well, that's just 2 channels. But that's not the same as spatial audio.
No.
And I think just understanding that difference and giving everyone the kind of, the HiFi, the higher definition gear to be able to listen to it back and appreciate what you get with all of that is just all part of it.
So we're in a system with 246 height and space speakers at the moment.
Yep.
Where is it going to go next? Is it going to get bigger, or do you think this is as far as it goes?
The format, one of the goals of the format is that it's scalable. So you can mix on your 7.1.4 system and you can play back the same track file. You can play back on a system with 100 speakers, and it's within the Atmos decoder that then chooses where to place all of those objects and what signals are going to what speakers in whatever size system you have. It scales it up so that the positioning of everything is still the same.
Oh wow, that's really I wasn't aware of that. I don't understand the technology at all behind this, but that's really interesting that you can. So is it the system itself that chooses that?
Yes.
Oh wow.
Yeah, that's the part of the decoding now, which is great. Yeah. So and that's what I was saying. So if you've just got a stereo system, you play that exact same file, and you tell the Atmos decoder, I've only got 2 channels. It folds it all down to 2 channels. And then if you've got 5.1, it will play it, and you'll still have all of the objects moving around and hear it. It just won't be as well defined. And so the other way that we could consume this and where it could be going is you could have an auditorium 4 times the size of this with 100 speakers in it, and we could be talking about Dolby Atmos live, a bit more of an immersive live audio experience with all of these speakers, with all of the experience of everything rushing around your head.
So we've experienced this earlier. What has been the reaction when people left the room from the immersive experience? Because it's the first time I've experienced, apart from the kind of blue that we saw 5 years ago. So what have people said when they've walked out of the room?
I think it's the same kind of reaction as that. A lot of people are coming into it being aggressively pessimistic. And I think Stephen was enjoying that earlier when he was running through his sessions. I think some people are coming away thinking, yeah, that sounds pretty cool. I think a lot of people will not be convinced by it. But let's face it, it's a biased scenario that we're in at the high-end super 2-channel HiFi show. And so we've got to appreciate that. But there's been some fun discussions that come out of it with the people that have experienced.
Hi, I'm Stuart from HiFi PiG. I'm here with the legend that is Steve Wilson. We've just experienced Get Immersed with Steve Wilson and PMC, and it's been a really sort of ear-opening, eye-opening experience. So I'm lucky enough to have 5 minutes with Steve, so we're just going to ask a few questions. And so one of the things that you brought out in that was there seems to be a good degree of resistance from 2-channel people to get into the whole idea of immersive audio. Why do you think that is?
So one of the things I say in the presentation is, I ask the audience to say, who here is a real stereo, you love stereo, but who is a bit skeptical about spatial audio? And usually about at least half the audience will put their hand up. And then I say to them, well, what would you say if I said that stereo is spatial audio? Because it is. By definition, the moment you have different sounds coming from different places, you are listening to spatial audio. So this is really just the next step on from that. I think people generally are resistant anyway to change. We're all resistant to change. And also the other part of the equation is I think people have heard some very poor examples of spatial audio. And just like in stereo, it's possible to do it well and it's possible to do it not so well. I've heard some terrible spatial audio mixes, and if that had been my only experience of spatial audio, I probably would have been very skeptical too. And so the whole idea of this week and presenting this, this introduction to spatial audio is to try to get people over that sort of hump of being, predisposed, if you like, to be negative about spatial audio. It is just the next natural extension from mono to stereo, so from stereo to Atmos or spatial.
I had a conversation, just chatting with Peter there, and many years ago, Peter made the comment about when stereo came into being, the resistance from mono to stereo was very much like we're experiencing now with stereo to immersive.
Yeah.
So you said that you work very much in the box, everything is done digitally and on a computer. Do you think that's part of the reason that people are a little bit resistive to the whole immersive thing, or?
Possibly. I mean, again, another thing I say in the presentation is 20 years ago, there would have been a good argument to say stuff made digitally doesn't sound as good as analog. I don't think that applies in 2024. The quality of digital, particularly a lot of the emulations now. So I'm remixing a lot of albums from days gone by. 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s albums. I'm mixing albums that were recorded originally in the analog domain. And I'm able to avail myself now of incredible emulations, all of the vintage out. So the EMT 140 reverb, which would have been used in the 70s, the Lexicon 244 reverb. Reverb is a big part, obviously, of the fabric of a lot of music. So you want to use the right reverb for the right era. And I'm very fortunate to be working in an era when these emulations, even of the old mixing boards, the SSL, the Neves, you can get emulations of those mix.
So do you use any outboard at all?
Nothing.
Wow.
Everything is in the box. Okay. Everything is in the box. And I think if I'm good at anything, it's making people forget that it's in the box because it sounds so analog. And, I don't take credit for that. The credit goes to these incredible emulations that are basically, I think, as good, to my ears anyway, and I didn't grow up in the era of analog recording, so I don't have the point of reference that, say, some earlier producers would have had. But for me, I can't tell the difference. I cannot tell the difference.
So we're sat in front of a huge PMC system, 300,000 euros or whatever it is. But you made the point in the presentation that people don't need that. Do you think some of the resistance, again, from the two-channel people is they think they've got to spend gazillions of pounds and have thousands of speakers all over the room? Do you think that's something to do with it?
For sure, and I think that's why previous sort of attempts to market spatial audio, so quad in the 70s, 5.1 in the 90s, the reason that those things failed is because you're not going to reconfigure the entire layout of your living room or persuade your wife that you're going to be able to do that, or your partner. And I totally get that. But we're now in an era when Atmos, spatial audio can be streamed through headphones, through sound bars, and okay, it doesn't sound as good as it does in this room with this incredible, PMC surround system with discrete placement. It doesn't sound as good as that, but it still sounds pretty good to me. I mean, I always make a point of auditioning my mixes on headphones. I get on the treadmill, strap my AirPod Maxes on, and I listen to hear how it will sound binaurally. And some of it still sounds really, impressive when you compare to the good old-fashioned flat stereo. To me, it's like, wow, that really opens it up. So I think this for me is why this time around, fingers crossed, the idea of spatial audio will prevail.
So what's your approach to if you're sent a file with different channels on it and all the rest of it? You mentioned this in the Immersive, I'm just doing this for readers. What's your approach to different pieces of music? Is it trial and error, or do you have a system for putting together an immersive mix?
So again, it really depends on what the record in question is. So a lot of the records I mix are established, canon classic records. So like Who's Next, for example, or Van Morrison's Moondance. these records people have been listening to for 50 years. They know them like the back of their hand. And there's a kind of paradox, which is that they want to hear those records the way they always have heard them. They don't want it to be different, but at the same time, they want some kind of fresh experience. So there's a kind of inherent contradiction there. So the way I approach a record like that is to match the original stereo mix as close as possible. The signature of the reverbs, the balances, even the stereo placement. So if something was on the left in the original stereo mix, I might have it behind you or above you, but it will still be over to the left. So all of these little things which keep the familiarity of the original mix, but at the same time make it sound like a new, fresh experience for somebody that's listened to that record a million times before. So there is again, I say in the presentation, I'm not an engineer, I'm not a producer. Everything I've approached as an idiot. Or to put it a different way, I've approached it as a musician. What works musically? What sounds good to me? And that's my only criteria really at the end of the day.
Do you think there's a fear from people thinking that it's all just a little bit gimmicky?
Well, because it can be. But then that's true of stereo too.
Absolutely.
I've heard lots of stereo mixes where things are bouncing all the time left and right. You know, so, and again, with the Sinead track, which I used to demonstrate so I start off by playing, just for your viewers, I start off playing the original mix of the Sinead O'Connor track, Nothing Compares to You. And at a certain point, about a minute in, suddenly it breaks out into surround and spatial audio. And nothing changes. There's nothing whizzing around the room. There's nothing moving around. Just things are suddenly placed in a more three-dimensional realm.
I turned to Lynette when it kicked in, and we both smiled at each other.
It's a magic moment,
isn't
it? Yeah.
It was incredible, yeah.
And I think the reason it's so embraced is because actually nothing's changed. It sounds exactly the same piece of music, but it just suddenly is all around you. And that suits that music. But there are other kinds of music, like I play Aha's Take On Me, and there's lots of electronic sequences, and I have them whizzing around the room, and it sounds great.
What's the favourite thing that you've remixed?
Wow. Wow, that's a difficult question to answer. I mean, for different reasons, you know. I mean, I've been fortunate to remix some of my favourite albums of all time, but actually some of the albums I've mixed that I've had the most fun with spatially are things like the Aha, the Take On Me, the track. Tears for Fears, Seeds of Love, which was always one of my favourite albums growing up, and that's such an incredible record. 8 tracks, they took 3 years recording 8 tracks.
Oh, wow.
And the amount of detail and layering and just painterly quality they bring to that album. It was a pain in the arse to do because it was so complicated, but that's one of my proudest, I think.
You did Warrior at the Edge of Time, didn't you?
I did, but not in Atmos. I only did that in 5.1.
Yeah, it's a really cool thing.
Yeah.
I'm a huge Hawkwind fan.
Me
so,
too.
Me
good.
too, yeah. That's good to hear. Steve, thank you ever so much. It's been a real pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you.